God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just to give you guys Christina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christina, and I am an alcoholic. And I am so grateful to be here. Keith, thank you for inviting me. I want to thank the committee for having me. Am I allowed to pull this down? No, maybe not. And I want to thank my host for getting me here on Friday. It has been an amazing weekend. I want to thank all the speakers. I feel like I'm leaving today with my cup full. I've been so inspired. And I want to tell you that my sobriety today, my life today, my perspective, and my God looks very different than when I got here. And Sandy Beach once said that Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't convince us there is a God, but what Alcoholics Anonymous is really good at is convincing us we need to find a God. And I didn't struggle with the God piece when I got here. It's just not my story. From an early age, when I was very little, looking up in the night sky, I knew God loved me. I knew I was a child of God. But I think along my alcoholism somewhere, I knew I couldn't serve two gods, and I put God on a shelf. And I never looked back until I got to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I did, you guys led me back to my God. And I am from Akron, Cleveland area. I'm from a little town called Brecksville, about 20 minutes south of Cleveland and about 25 minutes north of Akron. And so we have our Akron history in our area, and we have Dr. Bob's house. We have Founders Day. And in Akron, we have 855 Ardmore, which is Dr. Bob's home, and our co-founders, Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson, would sit around the kitchen table in Dr. Bob's kitchen, and they would have discussions into the late hours of the evening and early hours of the morning. And they would have these conversations that would later formulate what we sit in today, our fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and our program that is in our book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And Dr. Bob would describe that kitchen table they sat around as a modest piece of furniture. He'd call it modest. And we would sit around tables such as that, and in people's homes and church basements and coffee shops and restaurants and tables such as this. And what we find when we gather around tables is we find identification, unity, and transformation. And I have absolutely transformed from this process. My life, like I said, is completely different. And I'm going to try to put into words the transformation that has occurred in my life because of this process. And I know I'm going to fall short because words don't do this thing justice. But words are all we have, and thank God for our stories, right? And I get to do this deal in Alcoholics Anonymous where I get to wake up to another day's sobriety, just like I did this morning. And I'm here with you. And you guys, I get to be a mother, a daughter, a sister, a wife. I'm an auntie today. I am a productive member of my community. I pay my taxes. I have good credit. And I get along with people today. I'm no longer a nuisance to society, and I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing. Thank you, AA. My sobriety date is June 19th, 1993. My home group is Pockets of Enthusiasm. We meet on Thursday nights in Brecksville, my hometown. 7:30, if you're ever in the Akron-Cleveland area on a Thursday evening, we'd love to have you. My sponsor's name is Pat Y., and she's been my sponsor for probably a little over 3 years. I'm so grateful for her. My longtime sponsor was a woman named Beth Gordon. She was a long-timer. She died right before COVID with 48 years of continuous sobriety. And so I was raised by the old-timers in Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I want to welcome you and find your old timers, and just sit down next to them and listen to their stories, because we're losing them. And, and also, if you're new, we have, I just want you to know that buckle up, because this thing is amazing. And I always like to talk about identification when I take the podium in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I think identification is extremely important. And when I got here, I didn't understand this concept to identify. And I would listen for all the differences and none of the similarities. And I almost compared myself right out of the rooms. And the spirit of identification is the crux of this beautiful program and fellowship. Because we come from different walks of life. We come from different socioeconomic, cultural backgrounds. And we all bring to the table in Alcoholics Anonymous such diversity and experience. So as I stand up here this morning and share a little bit about my story and about these steps that I've been tasked to talk about, and I talk about my trouble may not look like your trouble, right? My trouble may not look like Edith's trouble, but trouble doesn't identify me as an alcoholic. Trouble is just a byproduct of drinking behavior. What makes me an alcoholic is I have this allergy of body and an obsession of mind, and I cannot safely predict what's going to happen when I put alcohol into my body. All bets are off, and one is never enough. And it took me a long time to figure out that when I sit among you in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and I listen to people share, that I'm to really identify with the message, not so much the messenger, right? And I'm to listen for 4 things. I'm to listen for how we lived, how we drank, how we felt, and how we thought. Those 4 things are identification in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we absolutely must identify to stay here. It is the beginning of hope for us. I have been given this gift of sobriety. This is a gift to me. And I used to question why some of us get this gift and some of us don't. Why I stand before you in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And over the years, I've watched people I care about walk out those doors to meet certain and uncertain death. And I used to question why me and not him, and why him and not me. And over the years, I've come to realize that those questions and those answers, they're just none of my business, right? That in my humanity, I'm not capable of understanding the answers to those questions. And perhaps I'm asking all the wrong questions. Today, I absolutely know what my job is here. My job is that, I have been given and I have accepted this gift. And I need to do the things that you taught me to do to keep this gift. And ultimately, that means for me today to be a giver and not a taker. My parents were great parents. They taught me morals and values. They gave me everything I needed and wanted. And somewhere around 4 years of age, my mom and my dad sat me and my younger sister down and told us they were getting a divorce. And I remember watching my dad walk out that door that day. And for the first time in my little life, you guys, I experienced fear and uncertainty. And this fear would become the backdrop of delusional thinking and skewed perspective that would drive my thoughts and my actions and my drinking. In Bill's story, he talks about impending calamity. And I understand impending calamity. I was always afraid of what was around that next corner, that other shoe falling. If things were good, I knew that they were going to turn bad. And if things were bad, they were just going to get worse. But woven beautifully within the instructions of our steps, it says, He enables us to match calamity with serenity. And you guys, today I know exactly where my solution lies. I always felt less than. I never felt like I fit in. I always felt like I was on the outside, out in the cold, looking in on everyone living their lives. I felt like I didn't get the memo that would tell you how to be, act, and talk with others. My tongue would get thick. My thoughts wouldn't come. And my peers would seamlessly maneuver through childhood and adolescence with ease and comfort, you guys, while I, on the other hand, would feel ill at ease, awkward, and uncomfortable in my own skin. And I didn't finish anything I started. And I knew something was wrong with me. But my first drink was going to change all of that. My first drink was a warm beer. My mom and my new stepdad, they had some beer in the refrigerator, and me and my sister, we stole them out of the fridge. We threw them under the couch, and when my mom and my new stepdad went to bed that night, we had a friend over, and we pulled out those beers. And I remember that drink like it was yesterday. It was warm. I choked it down. It tasted terrible. But shortly thereafter, it just had this glow, this warmth that radiated through my body. And it went down to my fingertips and toes, and then it went up to my head. And all of a sudden, I was enough. I was pretty enough. I was smart enough. I could talk to you. My tongue was no longer thick. My thoughts were coming. And, the best part was, I think, that I could laugh at your jokes. I was no longer uptight. And I found magic that night. And I proceeded to my mother's liquor cabinet, and I pulled out what I saw her drinking last, and they were just normal drinkers, and I pulled out amaretto liqueur, and I remember getting really drunk on that stuff, really sick, and still to this day I cannot stand amaretto candy, amaretto coffee creamer. But I couldn't wait to do it again, you guys, and I started getting in trouble. And I didn't see I was getting into the trouble that I was getting into, because everyone that I was hanging out with were all doing the same things. And Mom, get off my case. And I lived with my dad my senior year in high school, because my dad, my mom and my new stepdad I didn't get along with, and my dad would let me have the car on the weekends as long as I would drop him off at the bars. And the bars because my dad's a big drinker. When my dad left home, when I was very young, he wrapped his car around a telephone pole and almost killed himself, and I couldn't understand how someone I loved, someone whom I knew loved me, could go out and do something like that. And so he's drinking, and he frequents these bars. They're on a road called Brook Park in Cleveland, Ohio, and there's a particular area on this road that consists of dark, dank dives and gentlemen clubs. And he would have me drop him off at one of these dives, and he'd go and do his thing, and I'd go and have the party and have the car. And 9 times out of 10, I'd pick him up at closing. That was the deal to be had. And one night it stands out. I pick him up. It's 2:30, and there's one guy sitting at the bar drinking the last drink of the night, and there's a couple doing their last dance of the night, and there's my dad over in that corner. It's a dark corner, and he's got his back against the wall. He's sitting at a round table much like these, and he had his hand cupped around that glass and his eyes lost in that drink. And it took me a long time to figure out, you guys, what it was about that moment that seared in my memory. And today I know that was the moment that I knew that alcohol had my dad. And once again, I would swear that I would never be like him. Little did I know I was already well on my way in my own alcoholism. And he was an alumni of Ohio University. He was the first in our family to go to college and graduate. And he wanted his oldest daughter to follow in his footsteps. So all those plans, they were all made. And my senior year, I was doing a lot of partying. And as a result, my class attendance, my grades were suffering. And as a result of all that, I didn't earn the necessary credits to walk across the stage and make that milestone, right? And my thinking at the time was, so what? I'm not hurting anyone, right? Like we say. And today I know that's not true. Today I know that I robbed my parents of that privilege, that joy to watch their oldest daughter make that rite of passage. And I was able to scrounge up those credits in summer school, and I walked into an empty high school. At the end of August, I picked up my high school diploma, and off to school I went. OU is a party school, let me tell you, and I was pretty excited to be there. All the bars were in walking distance, and my parents were 5 hours away, and the party was on. And I had to declare a major, and I saw they were auditioning for the School of Dance, and I love dance. I was in kick line in high school in the dance group, And I'm young, and I think I'm going to go for it. And they put me in a ballet class, and I had absolutely no technique experience. And I bombed that first audition. And then they offered me another opportunity, and they put me in a choreography class, of which I happened to excel. And I made it. And so, and dance is not a fluffy degree as one might think. It requires pre-med. It was anatomy and physiology and kinesiology and biologies, and I had the academic piece and the creative piece all wrapped up into one fine major, you guys. And I found my passion, and I thought I found my future. But my alcoholism was going to take me in a whole different direction, and really, I only practiced my craft on the dance floor with a drink in my hand. And after 2 years, Ohio University sent me packing. And I moved up to Ohio State University, and I thought I was going to shower them with all my dance talents. But I never made it off the bar stool. And I started off on High Street where all the college kids would drink, and then I'd end up on the outskirts of town, because that's just how my drinking goes. And women, I didn't get along with women. I didn't trust you. I didn't have friendships, and it wouldn't be till I got to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that I would learn about friendship here. And there was this one woman, her name was Cherokee, and still to this day, I don't believe that was her real name. And she ran these traveling dance groups, and she thought I studied dance. She wanted me to join this troupe of girls, and I didn't really want to do that, because the truth was that these girls would frequent those dark, dank dives and gentlemen clubs, and they would take off their clothes. And I thought I was a real dancer, you know, and I never shared these thoughts with Cherokee and the girls, because there were always free drinks to be had, so I rode that wave as long as I could. But you know, we have a disease of progression, right? And I would lower my bar, and I'd cross those lines and seek lower companions. And I got to tell you, towards the end of my drinking, I'll end up on Brook Park Road at all those places. I can do a geographic cure without even going anywhere. I'm pretty talented. I did things like join Big Brothers and Big Sisters, or I attempted to do so, and I would go for the interview. And, you know, on some level, I think I was already trying to fix my insides by fixing my outsides. And I would interview for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. I don't know what I was thinking. And that went well. But they wanted to see my apartment. My apartment was trashed, right? Because, you know, my dad used to say something. He used to say that the company that we keep, the surroundings that we keep, are all a direct reflection of what's up here. You know, and he was exactly right. My apartment was a mess, my life was a mess, and everything up here was a mess. And I went home and cleaned up that apartment as much as I could. I'm not a finisher, like I told you, and I threw all that garbage in my bedroom, and of course they wanted to see the whole entire apartment. And thank God for the little girls, I did not become a big sister. I did things like I tried to join the church, the Catholic diocese in Columbus, Ohio, and Mother Superior did not find me a good match for the church. And I did successfully join the Army. And I thought they were going to fix me, right? I thought that structure was going to fix whatever was wrong with me. And they took me. But the truth be told, you know, I was discharged from the Army as a direct result of my drinking. And I was living on the streets of Cleveland at this point, and I'm living in my car. I have my collie Shepherd, and he's a prisoner of the back seat of that car. And it's middle of winter, and I'm trying to keep warm in the back seat. I turn the car on occasion and warm up, and we'd curl up in the back seat. And in the morning, I'd let that poor dog out of his prison, and I'd brush all that fur off my body, and I'd run into restaurants and try to sneak into the bathroom and take a bird bath. And I'd be horrified if you caught me, right? And I would move my car from neighborhood to neighborhood and street to street, because I didn't want you to see how I was living. And I'm on this dead end street. There's a brick building in front of me, and I'm trying to figure out how fast I need to plow my car into that wall and not survive. But I finished the six-pack that's sitting next to me, and I end up at a bar on Brook Park Road. It was a hotel bar, and it was ladies' night, and I don't know, I think I was going to try to get some money and do wet T-shirt night or something crazy, right? And I see a couple high school guys, and they're nice guys from school. I didn't hang out with nice guys, and they found out I was living in my car, and they took me in. It was actually a young man named Rich, and he took me into his family. It was his mother, his father, his sister, her whole family, her children and husband, and they had this warm, beautiful family dynamic I loved, and I was so attracted to it, and I didn't know what it was, and I always wanted what you had. I didn't want what I had. You know, the grass is always greener, and I always treated my family terrible because I thought that they should be something different, the expectations that I would place on them. And today I know my family is absolutely wonderful, and the problem was never my family. The problem is always Christina. But, you know, we're having dinner at this family's. They have these wonderful dinners, and I'm sitting at the dinner table with all of them, and my drinking becomes a topic of discussion, and I find myself in an Alcoholics Anonymous household, you guys. The father of this young man had 4 years of sobriety, and he took me to my very first meeting. It was a Thursday night meeting. I remember two things about that. I remember that it was just really smoky, and you guys were real happy. But there was something about that meeting that I went to another meeting the next night. It was Friday night West Clifton Group in Lakewood, Ohio, and it was 300 large. I came in late. It was very overwhelming. I sat in the back, and I remember it was just about ready to wrap up, and I'm getting ready to hightail it out of there, and a young man catches me, has a look on his face like he knows who I am, and I have no idea who he is. And he's real handsome. He has these dark eyes. You know, he thought I was my sister who spent a year in Alcoholics Anonymous for her drinking. And he thought I was her, and I took a hostage. And the long and short of that story is that we had this crazy, violent relationship, and we had 2 beautiful children together. And those 2 meetings would be the last 2 that I go to for a bit. And in 1992... it was Sweetest Day evening, and Rick, he has 9 years of sobriety, and he comes home with a bottle of champagne, and he says, "Honey, I think I was just too young. I think I can drink safely again." And I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't know anything about alcoholism. But I knew this, you guys. I knew he was in trouble. But I do what I do. And he popped open that bottle of champagne, and we drank it together. And my alcoholism continued off in this direction, and his alcoholism picked up right where it left off. And he went off in that direction. And we really didn't cross paths much. And my alcoholism took me to dark places, doing dark things with dark people, you guys. I burned bridges, I hurt my loved ones, and I emotionally and darn near physically abandoned my children. And the type of mother that I was when I finally came to you was this. I would come to at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, hungover, very sick, and not in a good place to be a good mom. And my babies, they would be locked in their cribs at 2 p.m., you know, with their diapers saturated with urine and feces, hanging off their little hips. And they would be hungry for breakfast, their mother's love and attention, and I was incapable of giving them all of the above, you know. And I would leave them with people that were no better suited than I was just to get to the drink. And, you know, I'd leave them in horrible conditions because the delusional thinking that I have, you know, I didn't want to be like my dad. I didn't want to drink in front of my children, and I left them often just so I could get to the drink. And I left them with one. I like to dine out on this story because it reminds me of the type of mother that I am when I drink. I left them with a couple who were in worse shape than I was. And my youngest was 5 months old, and I know this because he just started crawling. And while their mother sat on a bar stool, you know, I sat on this bar stool, and my youngest crawled behind their couch unattended, and he got pinned behind their couch. And he remained pinned for over 5 hours. And that is the type of mother that I am when I put alcohol into my body. All bets are off. Even my children. And you guys, I got to tell you, I love my children more than anything in the world. And I would have that battle going on in my head between my babies and that drink. And you know who won that battle. And you know who lost. My children would lose every single time. And so there's a series of events that bring me to my last drunk, and I'm face down on the west side of Cleveland in some joints, and I'm coming to a voice. It's Rick. It's my children's father. He has my babies in his arms, and I'll never forget the words that he spoke, the tone of his voice when he spoke them, and the look on his face when he dropped my babies on my back and said, "Get up and be the mother that you're supposed to be to these children." And he turned around and walked out. And you guys, at that moment, I knew the pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization our literature talks about. And I scooped up those boys, I threw them in the car, and I drove home. And I believe today that something was cracked open in me that day, and I was given a little bit of advanced grace, because I don't know how long it was from the time that I got home to the time I said the prayer that we say, that God help me prayer. It was my first surrender, and I said that prayer, and I made a phone call, and some woman came and she took me to my first meeting, and I started going to meetings with some of these ladies, and I heard some things here that were crucial in my early sobriety, and even continue to be crucial, today. Like, all I needed was a mustard seed of faith and willingness, and I could have what you had, and I didn't really know what that was, but I just wanted a little relief, right? And you told me to suit up and show up. Bring the body and the mind will follow, and that was okay with me. And you told me to stand at the door and shake hands, the girl who couldn't talk to people, right? And I had enough desperation to do what you told me to do, and I did it. And you told me to come early and make the coffee and set up the meeting. You told me to, stay late, close down the meeting, wash the coffee pots, clean out the ashtrays, right? Those metal ashtrays. What does cleaning ashtrays have to do with me staying sober? But cleaning ashtrays has everything to do with me staying sober. And all that early activity bought me the time in Alcoholics Anonymous to put those steps into my life. And I started hanging around with these young people, and they started carting me to meetings, and they invited me to a conference. It was the Cook Forest Conference in Cook Forest, PA, and I remember being in the back seat of that car. And I don't know how many people were packed in that car, but I remember feeling my mood to be lighter than it had been in a very long time. And somebody popped a cassette into the player, and a woman started sharing her story. It was one of the prior speakers of that conference, and she started talking about those dark places that I had been and those dark things that I had done. And then she talked about feeling dirtier on the inside than she did on the outside. And no matter how many showers she took, how much soap she used, she couldn't get cleaner on the inside. And for the first time in my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, I heard somebody put to words how I felt. I identified. And then she talked about this process and taking these steps. And as the result of these steps, she had a spiritual awakening and many more awakenings to come. And as a result of those awakenings, that today, she feels cleaner on the inside than she does on the outside. And you know what? I didn't know what you had when I got here. But when she said that, I knew exactly what you had. And I wanted it. And I started to get really busy in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think I was doing my amends. I was on my 9th step. And I remember whining to an old-timer about something that happened to me when I was a child. And if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't recommend that. And she was telling me, so I'm whining to her about something that happened to me, and she stopped me dead in my tracks, and she said, Christina, when normal people turn 18, they begin this process of growing up and taking responsibility. And when we come to Alcoholics Anonymous, we are well overdue. And it is time that we take responsibility and grow up. And she was exactly right. I was a little offended at the time, to be honest, but she what she was telling me was that I'm not responsible for what happened to me as a child. What she was telling me is that I'm responsible for how I feel about, how I think about, how I react to, and how I take actions today about anything that's happened to me from today all the way back to day one. And that is a huge freedom for me. On Friday afternoon when I got here, I received a phone call, and it was a sad phone call. I got a phone call that we often get, that one of our own made the ultimate sacrifice, right? And once again, our hearts break a little bit every time we get those phone calls, but they're reminders. They're sad reminders for me. And And I know that my alcoholism, you guys, creates this illusion that I am somehow separate from you, that I'm somehow different. I'm better than, or I'm less than, that my alcoholism disconnects me from you and from God. And the book says, it is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. Alcohol is a subtle foe, right? And I know today that what I did yesterday isn't going to keep me sober today. What I did yesterday in my program to stay sober yesterday is not going to keep me sober today. And I need to re-up. For me, the steps are fluid, in nature. I find it very hard or difficult to talk about a step in isolation. And I love the 9-step promises, you guys. And all those promises have come true. Back in our area, in the Akron-Cleveland area, many of our meetings, the 9-step promises are read. But my absolute favorite promises are the 10 and 11 steps. Those promises are amazing. They are amazing. And my experience on the 10th and 11th step promises have absolutely come true. What the book says about those promises has been my experience. I'd love to sit here and talk about all those promises. I'm not going to do that this morning. I'm going to talk about a few of them. And we have slogans here in Alcoholics Anonymous. We have, first things first, keep it simple, think, think, think. And they're great slogans. When I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was told not to trust my thinking and my feelings, rightly so, right? That I need to put some actions in front of that. That my ego tells me to think the problem through, and program tells me to take an action instead. Because when we're new, our best thinking got us here, right? Got us into a lot of trouble, and I know it got me into a lot of trouble. So I wasn't capable of trusting my thoughts. But really, the steps, it talks about our thought life, right? And 10 and 11 especially. So in the beginning of my sobriety, when I was taught not to think, about, something to take an action instead, it was really a temporary direction. Because as I moved through the process, and get to 10 and 11, and those promises, as I practiced 10, 11, that those promises would come true. So some of the promises I'm going to talk about in 10 and 11 are that sanity returns. That's been in my experience. And sanity is that we think and behave normally. My sanity has returned. Become God conscious. Develop this vital sixth sense, right? I become aware of my higher power, and tapping into that power, I become aware of so much more. Upon awakening, let us think about the day ahead. We ask God to direct our thinking. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. For after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrongdoing. And here we ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought, and decision. And when I take these steps, 10 and 11, I experience these promises. And I don't know when I started to recognize these promises were coming true. I really have no reference of that. I just remember realizing that they started to come true. And we've entered the world of the Spirit. You guys, my life is absolutely amazing today. And the journey and the adventure continues. I have such a beautiful life. I've had that psychic change. And so my children, they were brought up in Alcoholics Anonymous. And they were young and running around the rooms, and they had a lot of behavioral problems. And the women in Alcoholics Anonymous, you told me it was normal for little kids to have these problems when we come into the rooms. And as I got sober and well, that they would improve. And this didn't happen for me. It happens for most of us when we find sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous, when men and women bring their children here. But for me, my children would later be diagnosed with a serious illness. There is no cure. There's just treatment, and I was devastated. And I started wallowing in some heavy self-pity, but you didn't let me do that long. And you taught me about footwork. So you told me to stand at the door, and shake hands, welcome the newcomer coming into the rooms. When I walk into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and there's members already in attendance, that I'm to walk around and shake your hand, and say hello. And you taught me all these things and so many more, and as a result, I was able to advocate for my children. You taught me to do footwork, and I learned about their illnesses. First it was layperson's information, then it became medical journals, and I became quite the expert in the area of medicine concerning my children. And as a result of all that, I was able to advocate for them, to get them the best care that they could get. And just like when Rick dropped my babies off on my back all those years ago and said, get up and be the mother you're supposed to be. Alcoholics Anonymous, you gave me that gift to be the mother that I needed to be to those children, and I will be forever grateful. And they're fine young men. Joshua is 32 years old, and he navigates his world pretty well. He still has his adversities, but he does really well. My youngest, he's 30. And he has, he still has his struggles with that illness, but he has our illness as well. And I know what to do with that. I know exactly what to do with that. I give them to you. Because Alcoholics Anonymous works, and it works well. It absolutely works well. And I want to tell you a little bit about my God. I didn't struggle, like I said, with this God, And that very first prayer I said in the beginning of my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous, that God help me prayer, right? To then all the coincidences that turned into God moments, to having my eyes open to see God's hand at work in my life. And, I was finally able to reestablish that relationship with my higher power. And I finally realized that I had undergone that profound alteration in my reaction to life. And I was the lunch lady at my son's special school when they were little, and I was working as a lunch lady, and somehow I got offered. I had to interview. I was asked to interview by the staff to work with these kids with special needs, and they had brain traumas, physical and emotional. They had autism. They had mental illness. They had drug and alcohol involvement, gang involvement, and they offered me that job, and I believe that day that they saw Alcoholics Anonymous in me. And I worked that job for, 21 years, and I absolutely loved it. And, I didn't graduate on stage like I told you with my mom and my dad. I kind of robbed them of that. But in 2012, after class after class and test after test, year after year, after 20 years, it took me 20 years, I was able to walk across the stage at Cleveland State University with my mom and my dad in attendance and my husband. So I worked in this career with these troubled youth, and I loved it. And at some point, I was honored and privileged to receive the Teacher Counselor of the Year Award. Thank you, AA. And my God was pulling me in another direction about 5 years ago, and I felt like this career, I just wasn't able to serve in the capacity that I was serving these kids, and so I gave up my medical journals and my pens and papers, and I traded them all in for a hard hat and steel-toe boots. And at 50 years of age, I got a job in the steel mills back in Cleveland, and today I'm a millwright. And if you don't know what a millwright is, it's like a mechanic who works in heavy industry, right? We work on big machinery and heavy industry, and I love it, you guys. I can't carry a 3-ton chain fall up a ladder, right? But I can show up. I can do what you taught me to do. I can show up and set the job up. I can burn and weld, and I can contribute where I can, and I can be teachable. And I love it, you guys. I'm one of 3 female millwrights in the whole mill of 2,000 people. And my experience is that through these promises and these steps that you can do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. You may not want to be a millwright, but if you're new, you can do anything. And I met my husband in Alcoholics Anonymous, and one of the things I loved about him was his excitement and enthusiasm for this thing. Because Alcoholics Anonymous saves lives. It brings people together and back together. And it is... it's miraculous. AA is miraculous. I want to tell you a little bit about Rick, my children's father. He picked up the drink at 9 years sober, and he was off and running, and I had a front row seat to watch this thing rob him of everything that he loved and valued, especially Alcoholics Anonymous. And he didn't make it back into the rooms. He became a wet brain, you guys. He got very sick from the drink, and he made it back into the rooms at some point. And I just want to paint that picture for you, because he'd walk through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, and his pants would be around his ankles, and he'd have no idea. And the men in Alcoholics Anonymous, you guys scooped him up and got him situated. You brought him in. You guys brought him coffee. And you all made him feel welcome again. You talked to him, because we don't shoot our wounded here. And unfortunately, most times, there was no one home. He'd be talking to himself or, lost in his own world, from that drink, right? And he caught me at a lucid moment, and he said, "Christina, I gotta tell you something. I got 1 foot in the door of Alcoholics Anonymous and 1 foot in, and I can't get back." And I had no idea how profound that statement was when he made it in school at the time, because you taught me I could be useful and productive. And, it's Thursday. It's his birthday. He's supposed to come over. We haven't seen him in so long because he's been so sick. And he's going to come over that evening and celebrate his birthday with the boys. And I'm in class. It's 8 a.m., and I have a thought. I have classes all day, till 4 o'clock, and the kids are on daycare campus. I have this thought that I'm going to cut class, because I told you I'm not a finisher. And I'm going to cut class, and I have this heavy feeling. Rick is heavy on my heart, and I don't know why or how to describe that. And I have this thought, I'm going to cut class. Rick is heavy on my heart. But no sooner do I have these thoughts and these feelings do I hear your voice. And your voice says, "Christina, when we make a commitment in Alcoholics Anonymous, we see through to that commitment in and out of the rooms of AA." And so I stay the course, because that's what you taught me to do. And at 4 o'clock, I pick up the boys. We go home. I make dinner. We're expecting Rick to show up, and he doesn't. And that is not atypical of this time of his life. So I make a couple phone calls. No news is good news. And I go to school the next day. And it's Friday. It's my home group night. I come home. It's 4 o'clock, and I'm getting the kids ready. And as a sober mother in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to take my children to someone who can care for them properly. I'm going to take them to my mother's house. And we're getting ready to walk out the door, and the phone rings. And it's before our cell phones, and I walk back into the house, and I answer that phone. And it's Rick's mother, my children's father's mother, and she's calling to tell me that Rick had passed away. And what I can tell you, the coroner's report said that Rick carved his initials in a 9mm bullet and shot himself in the head. And he didn't die in vain. There are no bad examples here for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I can learn from everyone here. And I know exactly what he did and didn't do. I know he stopped going to his meetings. He stopped picking up his guys, taking their phone calls. He stopped taking those steps, and he believed that great lie, that one day he could drink safely again. And I'll never forget the banner that hung behind the podium of my first home group. It said, "Watch well your beginnings. The results will manage themselves." And life went on for me, and there was an old timer at my home group. So in the Cleveland, Akron area, we have meetings. Most of them are speaker meetings, and at our speaker meetings, we have comments, right, Zeb? And so, it's not crosstalk. We actually, are allowed to get up and thank the speaker when he or she sits down. And there was an old timer that always stood up and thanked the speaker for bringing the message to the home group. And one of the things he'd always say in every comment is, I came to, and I came to believe. And I too. I came to, and I came to believe. You guys, I came to your meetings, and I would see the light in your eyes and the smiles on your faces. I'd hear the chatter in the room, and you tell me to take an action that I don't yet believe in, to surrender to someone else's prior experience. I'm not surrendering to somebody else. I'm surrendering to someone's prior experience. That I have this ego, and I want to think about the problem instead of taking an action, and so I surrender and take these actions, right? And I start taking these commitments. I start showing up. I start saying yes, right? And I start to come to. And I'd have these experiences in here among you, I'd have these experiences where things would start to look like God moments. And these experiences would begin to build upon each other and fortify. And these experiences then started to challenge my belief systems and my old ideas. And I came to believe. And my life today is amazing. I absolutely cannot believe the life that I live today. Every day I make a decision between my God and my ego. And most days I'm choosing my God. Today I know I align my will with His. And today it's 10, 11, and 12. I practice 10, 11, and 12. I surrender, I awaken, and I transform. And I've absolutely transformed from this process. I hope that on some small level that I did my job this morning, that I shared a little bit of my experience with 10 and 11, and that ultimately that I carried this message. On a basic level, taking an action when I don't want to, is an act of humility. Coming to a meeting on a very basic level is an act of humility. Showing up and saying yes to a commitment that I don't want to do is an act of humility. Standing up here for a girl who can't talk to people is an act of humility. And I hope that I get to carry this message. And I know that we don't carry our message. I don't carry my message. I don't carry your message. We don't carry anything else but this message. There was an old timer in Toronto, Canada that I loved dearly. His name was Frankie O. And when he would take the podium, he would talk about waking up in Alcoholics Anonymous, being awake in life and being present in the moment. And I can just miss the moment, you guys, being caught up in all the worries of yesterday or the fears of tomorrow, that I can miss the moment here and now. And it took me a long time in sobriety to realize that the only moment that I can experience the presence of God is in this moment right here. I can't find Him in yesterday or tomorrow or the last moment or the future because He just doesn't exist there. And I go it alone if I do that. And I don't want to miss my beautiful niece when she's telling me her stories, like the time the little girl in class burped up a cupcake. I don't want to miss my son's experience, joy, and success. I don't want to miss the newcomer walking to the room. My longtime sponsor, Beth Gordon, who passed away in 2020, when she would talk about Alcoholics Anonymous being the greatest love story ever written and ever told, you guys. And isn't it true, from our earliest beginnings at Bedside to our humble neighborhood meetings and home groups to gatherings such as this here this weekend? It's one alcoholic sharing his or her experience, strength, and hope with another that we come home. So I like to close with a story about a little boy. He walks into Sunday church with his mom for the very first time, and he walks into the beautiful stone cathedral. He looks up at the stained glass windows, and he says, "Mommy, who are those glass people?" And his mother looks down at him and says, "Why, those are the saints." And the little boy, he goes to school the next day. He's still in awe from the day before. And his mother or his teacher asks him what he did over the weekend. And the little boy beams, and he says, "I saw the saints." And she's like, "Well, who are the saints?" And he says, "The saints are the ones that let the light in." So I want to thank all of you for always being present in the moment for this alcoholic, and I want to thank Alcoholics Anonymous for letting the light in. Thank you for my life.